the topic that was given to me was related to urbanization, urban energy use, and so on. So I do have a few slides here, which I'm going to use just as talking points. I do have specific things to share related to the built environment, which I'll come to very soon. So let's look at the snapshot of how the urbanization is changing in India. So clearly, uh, between 2009 and 2019, we are seeing substantial increase in the urban population. So we have close to 34, 35% or so population that's living in the urban India. So there is obviously different types of migration that are happening from rural to the urban centers. And in all and most of the data that I've used during this to create this presentation, I'm using COVID-19 related impacts as outliers. So I'm not really dwelling on that because I'm quite optimistic about Indian economy and business as usual to return in some ways. There will be certain sort of substitution effects that we'll see in the commercial energy consumption and domestic energy consumption and so on. But all the data that you're seeing currently does not take into account the reverse migration that we have seen. And we also were hoping that we will see some kind of a rural entrepreneurship and the rural industrialization, given the fact that there is a lot of workforce that's sort of moving into the hinterland. But be that as it may, as it stands, during the past decade or so, there has been substantial increase in the urban population that we have seen. Um, yeah. So in terms of the carbon footprint of the Indian cities itself, so we have certain numbers coming from research, and clearly we are seeing some kind of a differentiation in numbers. So and it also is an impact and a function of the way the social strata exist in different cities in India, the slum population, the population which is living in the formal housing, the aspirational consumption related to different types of appliances, and so on. So you would see in the urban cities, road transportation and road transportation related CO2 equivalent greenhouse gas emissions vary between different cities. And I would like to sort of point out here that Kolkata and Mumbai and Ahmedabad are a little bit of sort of lower in this sort of analysis. And I can certainly speak for Mumbai because I live here, I've been born and brought up here. So there is a culture of using public transportation, and Professor Dinesh Mohan talked specific things about the public transportation. In Mumbai, we never grew up using your personal vehicle, be it a two-wheeler or four-wheeler. Two-wheeler and four-wheeler were essentially some kind of a luxury items in at least middle-income households. So there is a culture of using public transportation in the city such as Mumbai. The moment we started seeing Mumbai metropolitan region and sort of the city is actually expanding into nearby towns such as Thane, Vasai, Virar, Navi Mumbai, and so on. We started sort of increased use of personal transport as well as the public transport. But let's now move to the greenhouse gas emissions from the domestic sector and specifically the electricity sector. So again, there are sort of variances related to the climatic conditions as well. So if you look at Delhi, using air conditioners or air coolers in the Delhi households during summer season and using heaters in Delhi during the winter season is inevitable. We are not going to sort of promote any kind of greenhouse gas emission reduction opportunities compromising on the human conditions and the conditions that we sort of every day live in. But coming to say Mumbai, I always sort of wonder why do we really have so much of consumption in the domestic sector? Obviously, the net disposable income, even in the slums of Mumbai, is pretty high compared to other cities. And even in a slum dweller household, you would see several appliances such as refrigerators and not air conditioners. In fact, we have started seeing air conditioners in slum pockets as well in India, in Mumbai specifically. So this is sort of a comparative of different cities and the way the transportation energy and the domestic energy is sort of being used. Um, Going on, there is another important component which we really do not sort of take into account, and that is of what is the carbon footprint of bringing in water into the cities. So, to give an example of the city of Mumbai, we get our water sources, especially the potable and the drinking water source, is about 100 kilometers away from Mumbai, and the entire water gets pumped into the city, and that actually needs to be captured as a part of the city's electricity consumption and the energy footprint itself. After it comes into the cities, it actually flows by gravity because of a very sort of important design aspect that we see in Mumbai's water distribution, where we have something called as Bhandu complex, which is a water purification center, from where which is at an elevation, and from there the water flows by gravity to most of the cities, including the southernmost tip of Mumbai, which is Kapre. I had also evaluated the Delhi Jal Board's electricity consumption, and that is not marginal. And in fact, what's important for us to understand is the energy footprint related to the water consumption needs to be compared with the provisioning of the water as well. So in India, it is said that around 70 liters per capita per day is the water consumption in the urban centers. But you have the CPHEO and so on recommending 145 liters per capita per day. Nowadays, they have started talking about 135. The world over, there are sort of certain efforts to push the per capita water consumption down to 50 liters per capita per day, and there is a global initiative that is called as 50 liters homes. But as far as the water consumption in the urban centers is concerned, it is increasing. So I had the opportunity to look at the water consumption and the energy consumption related to the water use in Gurgaon. And this was the data that we received from the Dakshin Haryana utility. And it's very startling to see that because of the multi-storied apartment blocks coming in Gurgaon, very similar to Mumbai, very similar to Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore, and so on. The water consumption related energy use in the households in Gurgaon is increasing compared to the previous era, or say a decade ago, when we did not really see multi-storied structures. We always saw independent houses, townhouses, and smaller houses, and that's what was the feature of Delhi. But again, Delhi is changing, and I think we need to be mindful of the fact that it's not only about how much water we are providing, but it's also about what is the level of energy consumption that is induced below the water use in the urban centers. I'm sorry. Yeah. So as far as the urban income is concerned, it's projected that by 2030 we are going to see somewhere close to 70% of growth in the urban income. And I think this point is absolutely important as far as aspirational energy consumption is concerned. So there are several efforts and what we call in the electricity sector as load research, which tells us about what is the appliance ownership. The appliance ownership is changing based on the aspirational income that people have. So first thing that you essentially have at homes is a television set, then you have refrigerator, then you have a washing machine, then you have air conditioning, then you have obviously fans come first before all of that, and also lighting comes before all of that. So as far as the urban energy consumption is concerned, it's going to increase. And I think the reason for me to mention this is here because there are specific strategies which the energy sector and the electricity market needs to push for in order to curtail the entire urban energy consumption coming from the households. And of course, it needs to be done even for the commercial and industrial sector, but specifically the households, which are sort of nowadays moving towards centrally air conditioned lobbies of large apartment blocks in cities like Gurgaon, Noida, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, and so on. So I think the culture of using electricity is sort of coming in India. I'm not sort of saying that that's bad. I think anything that is important in order to create better human interface with nature and human environment, I think is absolutely important. I also do not want to compare at the same time the electricity per capita electricity consumption in other countries. So, for example, in India, we always say that we have about 800 kilowatt hours per capita consumption in cities like Hyderabad, Bangalore. This is coming from data from the aggregated revenue requirements filed by the distribution utilities to the respective state electricity regulatory commissions. So I recollect the numbers from Mumbai back in 2008 or so, where we had about 800 kilowatt hours per capita per year of consumption from the urban dwellings. That has actually dramatically increased to somewhere close to 1500 to 1800. And if you really look at the skew of those who are consuming up to 100 kilowatt hours per month and those who are consuming somewhere between 200 kilowatt hours per month to up to 500 kilowatt hours per month, that is actually increasing. Fortunately, we have efficient appliances on our side. And if you really look at the pie chart of the electricity consumption in India, domestic sector is somewhere close to 24%, industrial sector is 42%. And again, a caveat, an important caveat here, I really don't know what's going to happen to the commercial and the industrial energy consumption in India post COVID. The way we are sort of started looking at our work and individual household sort of energy consumption. So that's going to change drastically. But the important point here is during the last decade or so, or less than that, the electricity consumption per capita has increased by at least 40 to 45% in the key urban centers. Similarly, the petrol and diesel used in the transportation has increased, and I think the data suggests that 75% of the petrol and diesel transport is used in the urban India. So I think it's not also related to the intercity transport, but also the intra-city transport is increasing substantially. Professor Dinesh Mohan made very important points related to the electrification of the transportation. There are a few important imperatives that we need to sort of bring into the discussion there, wherein when we have a huge share of renewable energy that's coming into the electricity grid, what are the opportunities for us to absorb that additional electrons that are available and at the same time reduce our fossil fuel consumption in the transportation sector. All of this said, I think it's also important for us to understand the impact of the tailpipe emissions and the local air quality on the urban in the urban sector, and what impact does it really have on the individuals. That point I feel is absolutely important, and that was something which triggered the entire transition from diesel-based public transportation in cities like Delhi and Mumbai with the High Court's interventions to compressed natural gas. I think one of the key aspect of us pushing forward efficient and low carbon energy consumption in the urban settings, including what we use in the appliances and domestic sector, as well as in the transportation, we need to be cognizant of the local air quality impact and the health impacts of all of that. I recently saw certain very interesting statistics from the Center for Science and Environment talking about the air quality in Mumbai. So, despite the COVID-19 related uh, reduction in the commercial and industrial efforts in Mumbai, the local air quality in terms of the PM 2.5 and so has sort of deteriorated drastically. And that was something like a shocker, which I've never imagined that despite the fact that we had lesser industrial production in and around Mumbai, what's really happening. And then I think one key aspect that I would sort of attribute the PM 2.5 levels going up in Mumbai is post COVID and especially during the past 2 to 3 months, a lot of construction activities have sort of begun. And again, when we look at the urban energy consumption, I think we need to be cognizant of the infrastructure development. And there are sort of public infrastructure that's getting developed with metros, roads, and bridges, but at the same time, we have one important sector, which is the housing sector. And as far as the cities such as Mumbai, which are densely populated, are concerned, moving people from the slums into affordable housing, which obviously for a city like Mumbai, it's going to be multi-storied constructions, is important. So we need to really account as a policy sort of objective. How do we sort of deal with that increased consumption? How do we really deal with the entire construction and the build out activity, which is also influencing the consumption of energy, at the same time also impacting the local air quality. In terms of the efficient urbanization, there are several
Hi,
things that we have seen.
I'm Dr. Mahesh. Sorry, just to interject, about 5 minutes left. You can borrow an additional 1 or 2 minutes, I think, from because I think we saved some time from the previous speakers, but just to give you a sense of time.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah. Then related to the reducing the carbon footprint of households and commercial units, I think we all are aware of renewable energy targets in India. We have talked about 175 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity. I think what's also important is something which we have ignored for a long time, which is the appliances labeling and standard initiative by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. I think some of the things that got triggered because of creating the labeling plan for appliances such as refrigerators, air conditioners, water heaters, and so on. Bureau of Energy Efficiency recently released a report, and in that report claims close to 7% of the total energy consumption reduction because of the labeling program of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which also resulted in something close to 55,000 crores of cost saving. So this is not to be ignored. So if Indian energy consumption in the urban centers coming from the appliances needs to be tackled, aggressive appliance labeling and standards initiatives are also extremely important. I'll not get into the urban mobility. Perhaps I'll save some of these thoughts for the Q&A session. This has been covered by Mr. Randir as well as Professor Dinesh Mohan on the importance of the transportation sector. But something which I really want to sort of focus on here before I move forward is the importance of creating large bus rapid transit systems. We have no more than say 13 cities in India where we have some level of bus rapid transit systems. But I think we need to firstly have some kind of a defense mechanism to retain the good public transportation that we saw in cities like Mumbai. And we need to sort of enhance that by creating large scale, very efficient, low cost, low energy bus rapid transit systems, as well as some kind of intermodal transit systems that are important. I'm not going to talk about the electric vehicle strategy because Mr. Randir covered this comprehensively. All that I want to sort of say here is that the government, Niti Aayog, different state governments have their electric vehicle strategies and so on. But we really do not have enough public charging infrastructure. I do strongly feel that electrification of transportation is important not only from moving people but also moving freight. So it's all about even sort of creating intracity last mile of freight transit system which are dependent on electrification of the mobility itself. And I think the government has recently made some announcements to have 69,000 gas stations that we have in the country to have at least one charging point. But frankly, we have seen some of these announcements a few years ago as well. And I think there has to be some level of a sense of urgency to really push the oil marketing company who actually have some kind of a land holding on their own. So they are sitting on sort of huge land pockets, either leased or they own in quite a few cases. They need to sort of move towards creating large electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I would like to sort of, before I close, would like to talk a little bit about the importance of the built environment, which I mentioned during the initial part of this presentation. I think it's important for us to create technological advancements and innovations to make sure that, firstly, additional renewable energy sources that now we have are available for at our disposal, at the same time which are a lot cheaper compared to the fossil energy, need to be absorbed in the built environment. And if I were to ask, what are the two technologies that I would like to see coming into the Indian households and Indian built environment, the two technologies that I would sort of recommend highly are thermal energy storages, and the second one being heat pumps to be used for the heating and cooling applications. As far as the thermal energy storages are concerned, we have a lot of cold storage that are being built in the hinterland, in the peri-urban area, and so on. But my sort of wish list would be to see the volume materials in the affordable housing, in other commercial establishments, and so on, to start using thermal energy storage as sinks of the additional energy that we have. And I think it's important for us to make sure to come out of the logjam of we requiring peaking power to be catered to, and because of which we would not be able to sort of move away from the fossil-based energy sooner to a situation where we would have enough opportunity to absorb and store electricity. It's not only about the battery energy storage; it's also about thermal energy storage, which can sort of be enhanced by using different types of volume material, insulations, so on and so forth. And there are obviously clear efforts such as BRIHA, Eco Housing, LEED certifications, as which I have recently launched something called a JAMES, again meant for the built environment certification. So I think the point that I want to drive home here is that when we look at the urban energy consumption, and if you look at the built environment and the entire construction activity, we need to be mindful of the fact that there are technological advancements that are possible, and even those who are working in the electricity markets would realize that there are also immense opportunities through efficiency and the demand response type of initiatives. To all of above, to target a higher level of penetration of renewable energy so that India can sort of move a little bit in a faster adoption of the RE techniques and technologies to be embedded in the urban centers. Thank you.